So I had a former colleague. This person happened to have been in the CIA and in the Air Force at prior to my uh, working relationship with them. And they were talking about how they've lived in Lebanon. They've lived in all places in the Middle East, deployed multiple times, right? And they said to me one day, and I'll be honest, I've never felt less free than when I moved back home to the United States. Most conversations about connection tell you what to think, but are easy answers ever enough? I'm Keith Richardson. With my co host Gerren Taylor, this is More in Common. Honest conversations about what keeps us apart and what doesn't have to. Come think with us.
So
Why
Keith,
why would I be dancing?
how's your Dougie practice
Oh,
going?
oh, the dance,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, so
Uh-huh.
the recital's coming due.
Okay.
So you'll see that.
All right.
And
That's a part of the it's a part of the fabric of the show now. I hope you know.
we've got our final rehearsal coming up. And not to expose the third wall, but man, it's
It's the
it's
fourth
all
one.
approaching. That fourth wall, yeah. This year's dance is a little less complicated than last year's dance.
Okay.
So I still enjoy it,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
I've got it pretty locked down. Well, this is welcome back to the More in Common podcast. I'm Keith Richardson. This is Gerren Taylor.
are we
And
just
this week we're
exchanging?
gonna
We're just doing one
yeah,
and one now?
let's switch it up,
All
have a
right.
nice, serious tone,
I'm not
somber
you've
tone.
already apologized to me for that one, so I guess I don't have to be mad about it.
Dude, last week we talked about individualism. We came at it, but you mentioned some things, particularly, right, the loss of the third place and this idea that we have our community engagement has declined significantly, which when you think about hyper individualism, um, and its impact on loneliness, and we think about the loneliness epidemic, which is real and documented, and we think about the increases in anxieties and depressions that correlate, I'm not going to say cause, to this transition to hyper individualism, a breakdown in our social communities. And yes, some people will say we connect differently, but we don't connect in person the same way we used to.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
think that we talked a lot last episode about establishing that there was a trade-off that happened, right? Like there was an
Yes.
exchange made, and I want to kind of dig this one then in this episode dig into what we left behind, right? Because it's funny, and this is the other thing about houses is when you go in remodeling a house, you start knocking down walls, and you don't necessarily know which ones are load bearing, and sometimes until it's too late. And I feel like that's what happened here, right? We made these trade offs. We started remodeling how we organize ourselves as a society, and we lost some load bearing societal community things. The intergenerational family you were talking about, the shared child rearing, the male loneliness epidemic, I think is also tied into the similar origins of losing community, losing identity, trust within each other, and the ability to connect on other things. And there's data to back this up. And so we were talking about the third place. This is Ray Oldenburg who coined the term in a 1989 book, The Great Good Place. The first place is home, the second place is work, and the third place is everything else: the barbershop, the bar, the community center, the bowling alley where you get together, the stoop. Right? If you're a New Yorker, like gathering on the stoop outside and being outside in the afternoon. Um, and the argument, which I know you were going to talk later about Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone. But the argument is that the third places are the infrastructure of building democracy and community. And that is one of the number one things that we've lost in this trade.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you think about that emergence of individualism and where it comes from. At least in this is my assertion based on all of these complicated pieces of research that demonstrate this is actually happening. etc., um, is that these walls that held us up, these spaces that gave us place to congregate. Church is the best example of this over time, is that it gave us space to be ourselves, right? To talk openly, to share if we want to be in a bad mood, to give back, to share, to give value, right? Like, let's use the barbershop just as a tangential, like, to be the funny one, right?
Right.
I might not be
Right.
the funny, but at the barbershop, I'm the funny guy. So now I
Right.
have a role, I have a value. I'm the wise one, right? Or I'm the crazy one, but you get a place to be the crazy one in that space. But what also happens in that is that parameters are defined of who is welcome in that space, right? In church, it's ideology. Like, you either have to believe or fake you're believing, or else you're not welcome there, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you have to have a certain level of graduation through school to demonstrate that you are this particular religious denomination, versus it just being a place where we all go and that we all share in it and that we help each other and that we work with one another, that our individual value can emerge through this communal activity. And because of those walls, that we've decided we need to open up for kindness and acceptance of all people. To your point, it broke down the structural integrity of how we operate as human beings, because we need each other in these spaces in order to feel our own value, to feel connected, because we are socially wired.
And I want to start this part off by saying I have always tried to counter this, even when I didn't have a name for it, right? For me, when I lived in downtown Los Angeles, almost 12, 13 years ago, we started a community brunch, DTLA First Sundays, which went to local bars and restaurants and created an excuse to build community. Shout out Anthony, who's still to this day doing DTLA First Sundays in downtown the first Sunday of every month, building community, because that's how he saw his dad building community in other ways when he was growing up. And so he created something for that. And to let that space breathe. And it's interesting because the data really does back up. I know people feel it. I know people feel more isolated, but the data seems to be backing that up, right? Like around half of Americans regularly spend time in a public community space, and that's down from 2/3 in only 2019. So obviously we're impacted by pandemics and stuff like that, but just staying inside in general seems to be up. And in 1990, only 3% of Americans said they had no close friends outside of family. Today, that's about 20%. That's incredibly isolating. And what happens is, I think not only do we not have that as the current generation existing and operating, but we also can't model it for their kids. My nephew, who's 19, I was just talking to him about this yesterday, having not just awkwardness, but like literally saying, I don't think I've ever walked up to a girl and just said hello and started a conversation that I thought was attractive or whatever and wanted to meet. And I was like, wow, like you should go do that. And, I gave him the Galloway, right? Like, go be told no, go experience failure and try it again and try it again. And you need those interactions, but maybe that is also because where is his third place as a teenager in that awkward, space growing up? He's too young to drink. He's still figuring out getting out of his mom's, and living on his own. I think, as the generation of elder millennials, as myself, I have a boomer mom, and, she moved when I was 18, right? The apartment I grew up was no longer available to me because she left town and went somewhere else, and I had to figure out my life. And, that is part of the hyper individualism. It even extends to your kids. Like once your kid is 18 in America, you're an adult.
See ya.
See ya.
And like, look, and if they're in the house until they're 25, we sit here like, you think about how we've treated the elderly for the last century, right? We start building these retirement homes, and we start telling the elderly they need to commune with each other versus having this intermixed community. And I think you said this at the end of last episode, this value of forced gathering versus chosen gathering. The value in forced gathering, which we hyper individualism has prevented us from doing, other than maybe church now, right? Like, people, I've got to go to church. Well, what is the value of that? Take the ideology out of it. The value is you meet people that aren't part of your intimate circle, or your circle that surrounds your intimate life, or your friend. Like, you start building concentric circles of socialization. So
Mhm.
now you have this idea of extended weak ties, people that aren't people you call if you are you lost your animal and you need someone to cry with, but maybe you're looking for a job, and now you have this network of people who are like, hey, let me help you. Or I've got an idea, or if I've got this thing over here, or I've got a friend over here. And we weaken those weak ties. And those weak ties are really a considerable value to forced community. Hyper individualism tells us, I don't have to do it. What we end up losing is the skill to do it, to go to the thing you don't want to go
Yeah.
to be around a larger group of people and learn how to interact with them, learn how to build relationship with them, learn how to understand how other people operate, and learn how to have friends that aren't your best friends,
And
right?
I want to
Go ahead.
dial in on the intergenerational community thing that you're talking about, because this is
That, yes.
so, so important. Listen, for the most of human history, we have been in intergenerational communities, right? Like you're saying, this idea that old people need to commune with each other and not with youngsters is completely new and foreign to us as human beings, and
Completely new, to the
probably
extent that
not
we say,
going well.
bye bye, boomer. And we have all these
Yeah,
intergenerational terms and frustrations and tensions in workplaces where boomers can't work with millennials who can't work with Gen Z. And like,
right.
it becomes this
And think about,
tension
like, I
point
don't
rather.
know what it was for you, like, for you growing up, but as an African American, right, like, at least at holidays, it's very intergenerational. Everybody's cooking together, everybody's hanging out. It's all the big family group, not just the nuclear family of, like, "The 4 of us will have dinner tonight." It is, like, everybody at Big
Yes.
Mama's house, and the cousins are running around with each other, the uncles are probably in the garage. Aunties are gossiping, all the things that teach us about family and community and relying on each other and having these shared experiences. The default community, the people that you see all the time, regardless, because of existing. And it sounds quaint, but it's not nostalgia. This is the fabric of humanity. This is how we do it. This is how stories are told. This is how learning happens. This is where culture is produced. It's where you get your babysitters, right? The older cousin sits at the kids' table with the little ones and make sure they learn mores of how to behave at dinner. And you know what I mean? It's separated from the adults a little bit, but
You
they're
bring up
still all there.
you bring up a really interesting point, and this is actually from the if you read Bowling Alone by Putnam, he talks about this journey of the changing our community action. Well, what does it also degrade? It reduces how many people get involved in public service. It reduces how people participate in their broader community. So it starts to shift and change these other elements where people are less inclined, and it changes how people have dinner in their household. So people
100%.
don't, it's harder to get four people around a dinner table now. People complain, hey, we should all eat dinner together. It's almost as if it's this revolutionary thing, when in reality, people who had forced community also carried that forward into their homes relative to just we'll just talk about dinner because it's the tangible progression of what the research shows without digging into why. That being said, the less we engage in forced community or other community, the less we are to engage with our neighbors, right?
And I
Because we're not
think that
building those social skill sets.
but it's also connected to it's both and, right? I think the default community and then how chosen community is changed because it's so much more difficult. We're so much more busy doing other things, filling that time with other things. But VFW posts are down, right? Collective service, talking about collective service,
Yeah.
veterans of foreign wars, or the
Yeah.
Elks, their memberships. They used to have 2,000 lodges nationwide. They're down to a fewer than 1,800 with membership halved since 1976. And, back to Putnam's point, bowling league membership is down 89% from its peak, right? People aren't getting together even to do the fun social things that they used to do together. And as I was, as you hear both Scott Galloway and as we kind of pointing out earlier, like the young kids aren't even going to bars to drink. They're not even drinking alcohol socially together. So there's a whole other change. And I think that, pointing specifically kind of to the Rotaries and the Elks and the service clubs, that has a lot to do with the male social ecosystem collapse as well, because historically those would be the things, right? You're in the military together. Those are your boys. You're working the line together in a trade. Those are the homies. The union hall, people you meet there. The bowling league, even, as we were saying, is now not a thing as much as it used to be. And as those traditions and functions disappear, you lose that not only the default community of that, but the chosen community of that, and the third place to do it. It's like this
Yeah,
whole
and now it's becoming now we think about pairing this with hyper individualism, even the communities are more transactional, right? They're more I want to go to this place to bowl versus I'm going to this place to hang out with my buddies and bowl, right?
and I think that
Um,
it's also
Go
important to
ahead.
note that men really do make friendships more in shoulder to shoulder activity, shared experiences together than they do in just like face to face conversations and chatting. That's just how we are.
But look, we all do, right? Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
we've talked about this before just how structurally in 1925, Brecksville, the town I live in, started a mom's club. And so this speaks to the I also want to be very careful to toe this line of not going into this place of boy, it was really good back then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because these structural communities, these forced communities also had a lot of judgment. They had a lot of
Yeah.
parameters
Right.
to engage in. So I think about this Moms Club, which has been a source of so many of our friends here locally, how we've gotten involved in the community and really developed. But I have a friend, just doesn't live here anymore, that's a stay-at-home dad and struggled to consider joining the Moms Club because it's called the Moms Club. So in of itself, this goes back to the walls. We create
Mm. Mhm.
barriers to all of these groups. And there is a biological element to that, but it is not chosen from an evolutionary standpoint. The tribe you grew up with was the tribe you grew up with. The tribe that was 25 miles away that you didn't interact with could present conflict. So there are barriers, right? They didn't necessarily merge tribes, or if they did, it would take a lot of time, effort, and energy and trust to build. So there was inherently that wall, but within the walls was this acceptance of all the people, the roles they served, the functions, the skills,
And
elderly
and I
represented
think
1% of the population for much of human history. Now it's about 30%, right? So those dynamics have shifted considerably, but we've pushed away the idea of community because of some of its alienating factors and have not reset how to be communal in a
mm,
more open, accepting way.
but I do think that part of what you're pointing to is the now lack of the old adage, "It takes a village to raise a child," because what happens is the children who are raised without a village don't know the function of the villagers, right? They don't know what they're missing, and so now they're raising their own kids without a village, and don't know what they're missing out on as far as that support structure because they've never seen it. It's never been modeled for them, and so, like I said, we're really shifting in some ways how we've always reared humans, and we don't really know what's going to happen yet. I guess the jury's still out. I don't think it's going so well in certain ways, but I guess we'll see. And look, I get a unique perspective because I spent a lot of time in Mexico. Here, you still have intergenerational families. Not a big surprise. Like there's a lot of ladies I know who still live with their moms, and boys and girls, and if they're not married, you know what I mean. And the grandma's there too, and they make a lot of effort about collective family time and how family time is spent. And it's not like obviously anything to do with like wealth or anything to do with that. They value that connectivity. But even I was at the grocery store yesterday, also with my mom, and the butcher, he was behind the counter, mask like on, and then the hairnet and all that jazz. And I asked him a question. He was like, "Oh, hey," and I was like, "Whoa, what?" And he pulled down the mask. He was like, "I used to work at the corner store at the OXXO, and now I work here. Good to see you." And I was like, "Oh, wow!" Like not only does he remember me, but like wanted to stop and interact and create that bond again and say, yo, community member, come check me out over here now. Right. Like, I think that's cool. And I don't think that that happens so often, or at least I don't know that we let ourselves do that so often in America. Right. When I go to the store, the part of being in Mexico is saying hello to everybody on Buenos Dias. When you enter a place and you give them a little nod, you acknowledge each other's presence, and then that part of the bond of default community because you're here and we're going to interact and you're the shopkeeper and your kid is in the shop, as well, helping out, helping restock, and it's just different, and you can
You
see those
there
cultural differences.
you and I think what's important about what you're saying is the very American way and degradation of communal output. When you talk about how we're reshaping how we involve in community, I might go to this thing once a month. But what that's not leading to is daily increased interaction. It's that's the thing I go to once a month. And then on the day to day, maybe I'm working or I'm doing something, but the kid's in the store and, oh, it's a crying child, or, oh, it's a loud kid, or, oh, you just have more of these sentiments, or they're quiet when you're not, right? It's, hey, look, I've been on an airplane with a screaming child. I put my earbuds in and I feel for the parents. Right? I don't wanna I'm not mad that the kid's screaming because that sucks for the kid, his ear, like, who knows what's going on, and we're quiet about that support. We don't promote, like, "Hey, parents, like, I feel your pain, don't stress about me, don't do this." I don't, because we don't have these structures in place that enable positive interaction in very uncomfortable situations where forced community allows. And I'll share one of my favorite things about Mexican culture is Dias de Muertos, right?
Dia de los
It's
Muertos.
not, what's that?
Dia de los Muertos, yeah.
Dia de los Muertos. Yeah, that was really good Spanish there. But this
Pues, hablo
idea
español.
of celebrating not just the current people that we interact with, but all those that came before us.
Yes.
Right? The
Yes.
remembrance,
The
the
ancestors. Yes.
connection, that ancestral, and I'll share this story. So I had a former colleague who I had this interesting conversation with not that long ago. This person, happened to have been in the CIA, and in the Air Force at prior to my, uh, working relationship with them, and they were talking about how they've lived in Lebanon, they've lived in all places in the Middle East, deployed multiple times, right? And they said to me one day, and I'll be honest, I've never felt less free than when I moved back home to the United States. And it's not because of the political structures in place. It's because of the day-to-day structures where they would go to the market or they would live in a mile radius, knew everybody there,
Mhm. Mhm.
came home, lived in an apartment, and for 2 years didn't know the person across the hall, right?
What a stark con
And what a stark contrast, that the emergence, tying it back to last week, of hyper individualism has actually significantly degraded these, not just the existence of these community efforts, but our ability to participate in them.
Mm.
It's harder.
And
We're not practiced.
I want to dial in on something that you said about Dia de los Muertos because it's an interesting practice. It's not just about having your ancestors' pictures up, but specifically, you have an ofrenda, an offering to them, and you're supposed to leave something that they liked in life on the ofrenda for them. And that requires a bit of intimate knowledge of the person, right? In
Yeah,
order to even
right.
have an appropriate gift for that person in this showing of respect. And I think the other part about what you're saying, and where I want to move to as we kind of get to the end of this one, is the the underrated thing about the third place is that it's the great equalizer. I have a bar here that I love. It's called Dandy del Sur. I'm a dive bar aficionado or whatever. This is that kind of place where you pull up and whatever you are, doctor, lawyer, janitor, teacher, none of that matters. Everybody here is having the same experience together. I've been in there and something hits on the jukebox and we all just start singing together, you know? Because that social lever where you create this radically different opportunity to exist away from all the other identity labels that you have about yourself and just be in community together is such a unique experience to be able to have. And you know you don't need necessarily alcohol to do it, but it does come from a shared activity. It does come from a shared goal, and shared values in some way about what what's important. So the lack of the third place didn't just take away, the it didn't just make us lonelier, it took away opportunity for people from different classes, different backgrounds, different experiences to talk to each other and share experiences and see where we have things in common.
This is, I think, my as you talk, there's an interesting dynamic, particularly in American culture, whether it's media culture or that idea, like part of the reason these things break down is because we're seeking that place. Have you ever, I mean, I know you've walked into a place in America and you get the look like you don't belong here, right? Like, who's this outsider?
Record scratch,
Who's
yeah.
Yeah, right. It's in movies. And yes, there are places like that everywhere. There are specialized places like, wait a second, this is exclusive. Okay. But you can walk into a bar here and get that look just the same. I can get that look. You would get that look more than I would get that look versus a, "Hey, new person's in. Who are
Right.
you? Let's
Welcome, yeah,
talk. Let's welcome.
yeah.
Let's do that." And this is the breakdown of that weekly. This is where church really kind of is the place these days, but that shared ideology kind of keeps people out by having that cookout on a regular basis. We have very much created these spaces around sports,
Mm.
right? Like, oh, we're all a fan of this team. Let's all go to the bar and watch this team and we'll all celebrate together and we'll all do that. But it's not like that challenge is turning that into a social experience where we interact, where we chat. No, we're all focused on one thing that's separate from all of us so we can feel a sense of community, but we're not really developing. a sense of community,
Right.
where we're actually building skill sets, where we're filtering, we're understanding norms and mores, we're navigating political dynamics and discussions, we're learning to have compassion for someone who thinks differently, we're learning to embrace somebody else's perspective and point of view, we're learning all of these things as a social dynamic that end up bringing ourselves back home. No, we exist in a space with a shared attention, but we're not. We've lost our individual abilities to really be in that space uncomfortably at
Okay,
times.
so like it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about the load bearing walls. We decided to do some reorganization. We're redesigning the house. You know, we're trying to get a little more light. We want to put a bay window here, and we go knocking shit down, and all of a sudden, boom, right? We got rid of the third place. We got rid of the intergenerational community. We got rid of shared child rearing, the male social ecosystem that all look like shit we didn't need in the house anymore, right? Because you can have a nuclear family, and that's it. This is the experiment from 70 years ago. And boom, we started knocking shit down, and now we're like, oops, probably needed that because the ceiling's kind of caving in. Because the loneliness thing we were talking about, the loneliness epidemic, and you pointed this out perfectly. It's not a social media problem. It's not a phone addiction problem. Those things made it worse, but they didn't cause it. The cause is this project of saying you don't need other people.
Mm.
I, me, mine is fine, and you're going to be fine going through life like that, no community or whatever. And it's just simply not true. And now we're acting surprised that people don't know how to have those relationships, and it's awkward and everybody's like floundering, but we just, like you said, we just stopped doing it, and now we don't know how anymore. So we have to get back to at least creating the thought and intention around making third places and having those connections if we want to fix that.
So we've diagnosed a couple of really, really big things. We've talked about them. We've broken it apart. They're complicated. They're messy. They're important, and they're biologically what we need. I think next week, let's start heading into what we can do about this. And the complexities to doing anything at all without being nihilistic, because it's not easy. And it is not going to be this 70-year journey is a journey over time. This is an effort, not just for today, but for the next generation and the generation after that.
This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. We'll see you all again here for episode 3 in this arc next week. Have fun.